I was a single mother, so I didn't have time to sit down. I remember one day, and this, like Marcel was like 4 years old. I was so tired. I wanted to cry. I wouldn't wish being a single parent on my worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, because think about when you're exhausted and it's like the baby's crying. Oh, can you go get him, honey? There was no honey. That I was honey. So if I worked 12 hours and I come home, honey. I was still honey. If the baby's sick, everything fell on me. And I just remember one day I was on the sofa and I just wanted to give up. But that's not in me either.
I find it so interesting that, especially on Michelle Obama's podcast, people go on there and they seem to be a little bit more, I don't know if it's honest, but it doesn't feel, it is a podcast at the end of the day, right? It's not like an interview. So when you see celebrities go on there, they're a bit more honest and open. And I think that's the type of atmosphere that she wants to set up. But here's what I find really interesting, right? Take, for instance, this conversation here that they're having about her saying, I would not wish being a single mother on my worst enemy. And then she goes on to say, I was honey. There was no honey. So what does that tell you? And man, I've told you guys, even in the last video, they don't want to use the word husband. They don't want to use the word man. This is the modern woman mindset and mentality. It would be humiliating for them to say, I didn't have a husband or I did not have a man. It's shameful. And so they'll use words like honey, or in the last one you had Tracy Ellis Ross using words like partner, whatnot. But the shocking thing is, if it's that hard, if it truly is that difficult, why don't you see these celebrities, the ones who are single mothers, encouraging young women, especially young Black women, to marry before they carry? Why don't you encourage them to not be single mothers if you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy? And as this conversation goes on, you realize that they are putting the responsibility on the overall community, and specifically the men, not their husbands and the men in their lives, but Black men in general. You guys remember how Michelle Obama, or even Obama himself, was addressing Black men during the elections. It's like this discipline of we're disappointed in you guys. Why aren't you guys helping out, right? It's that idea that you're supposed to go in there if you don't have children and you are a Black man, which is the majority of Black men. It's a misconception that most of them have children, but they come down harder on those men instead of saying, hey, there's a toxic culture that encourages single motherhood and you need to speak out against it. But they don't want to be that, because then you're the coffee pot, right? You're a barista, and that there is toxic.
I think those thoughts, but then my ancestors go, girl, you better get up.
Right. And that's the part of what you said, that you never heard mom complain about it. I think that's part of the issue.
Part of the trauma.
When we grow up, our grandmothers, Grandma LaVon, Grandma Rebecca, these were all women, all Black women had to work.
Yep.
Our mother was fortunate. She didn't work until I went to high school, but that was a choice that she and my father made, because so we lived off of one salary and we made huge sacrifices for that, because I think my mother understood that if she was going to be the kind of mother she wanted to be, that we would forego living a good life, that we live in a little bitty apartment and just make ends meet. But that was a rare thing. But you've never heard these women complain, because it wasn't it was just the way life was. And I think that's part of our trauma too, because we grew up with women who weren't voicing the pain and the burden. They made it look easy. And when you make stuff look easy, people assume that you must like this.
Yeah.
It's okay with you, right?
Right.
We don't articulate as Black women our pain, because it's almost like nobody ever gave us permission to do that.
And does anyone care?
Yeah, there's
Will
that.
they care?
If we knew, I think we would care. If we knew. If we knew.
Or, Yeah. And we have to ask ourselves, the men in our lives is, why wait to be asked? It seems
The men in your lives, are you talking about your husband? Or are you talking about men in general? And by the way, I think it depends. I think some people care. Contrary to popular belief, I wouldn't talk about these things if I did not care about the people who want to be better in their lives. I wouldn't. I wouldn't be addressing any of these topics passionately if I didn't care about the men who say, hey, you know what? I am interested in having a healthy future as a man. How do I navigate modern dating? In fact, I actually do want a family, or maybe they don't want a family. They figured out that's not for them. But how can I navigate things and avoid toxic situations and relationships with women? And maybe I just want one woman and I don't want a huge family, so on and so forth, right? And even the women who have said many times, hey, you've encouraged me to do this and this and that. Overall, this is a man's channel. Some people care. Most of the world really does not care that much. But I think when you voice out your struggles like she's doing here on the podcast, though it may hurt, the truth is difficult. It's painful. More women will hear, especially the young ones, I wouldn't wish being a single mother on my worst enemy. And they will say, you know what? That's not going to be for me.
like what we go through is pretty obvious. I mean, maybe we're not complaining, but we're actually living life out loud, you see us carrying these babies. You see us working a job and coming home and managing.
Well, Michelle Obama has officially become an enabler of toxic culture as far as I'm concerned. More and more I hear from her, I'm like, yeah, it's all starting to kind of make sense.
Getting food on the table and handling doctor's appointments. And this is, if you've got a partner, right? I think some of us feel like, why should we have to ask?
Yeah.
It seems apparent. And as Black women, sometimes there is that underlying thing we're socialized to believe from very early on that we don't deserve any better,
or that this is life for us. It's going to be hard. Like I grew up just expecting it. I did.
This is hilarious. No, not her pain. I'm not laughing at her pain. Michelle Obama with the husband saying, why should we have to ask? I want you to realize what she's doing there. Putting herself in the shoes of things that she didn't experience to the extent that they experienced it, right? You've had a husband. Why are you sitting there and encouraging the mentality of entitlement from men who are not married to these women? You have to get yourself a man. Marry before you carry. Do everything you possibly can. It's not impossible.
It wasn't until, like my son, he's growing up. There's no dad around. I lost my father in 2006. His father was murdered 2 years prior to that. And so it's like, who do I turn to, And then, as you know, young boys, as he's growing up, the rose-colored glasses come off and he's starting to see life for a young Black man. And that was difficult. And I'm not a Black man. So how do I help him maneuver through this? And, I was like, we need help. And it was time to look for therapy, which I never shunned therapy because my father was a Vietnam vet and he always talked about his struggles openly.
Okay.
And so I was like, well, then we need help. And so I started looking for help for us. And when I couldn't find anyone who looked like us, because now I got to get my son to open up to someone and he's not going to feel right if the person doesn't feel familiar. And I was like, something has to be done here. That's when I launched the Forrest Lawrence Henson Foundation in honor of my father. Because I know in our community, we just do not talk about mental health. We don't.
Exactly.
We do not.
Because we are demonized, we are chastised, it's looked upon as weak, and
we give it to God.
We give it to God.
And that's an important,
God is very
spirituality
important,
is an important.
But God gifted humans to be therapists to help other humans. So it go hand in hand. You need both. So I was like, this is a real problem. And we started looking at the numbers and only like 7% of the therapists, clinicians, and psychiatrists were of color. I was like, this is because our children don't know to to go into this career,
right.
to even study this in college. And so I was like, we have to do something about this. That's when I started the work in the mental health. That's when I started checking myself. Like, whoa, you have been operating dysfunctionally for a while. You know, so a lot of the stuff I'm doing now is undoing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of undoing.
Yeah.
All right. You know, I have an introduction to therapy in Brew Brothers, and you know, I wish I was more active in there. I'm going to be dropping some more videos in there, but there's content in there. There's a lot of content in an introduction to therapy with Alvin Gilmore. You know, we sit down and talk about that. But you know what's better than therapy, and actually proven to be better than therapy? It's relationships with family. And so it's highly unfortunate to hear how things turned out for the father of her son. And I think like the next best thing probably would be therapy if you can't have a male role model in that person's life. And I think the fact that we see so many women who are highly successful and they aren't married goes to prove that money and fame cannot replace a man, right? It cannot replace a father figure, cannot replace masculinity within a relationship. Yeah, a lot to take away from this. What do you guys think? Leave your comments down below. As always, I appreciate you for checking out yet another episode of the Coffee Pod. Till next time, I'm out. Peace.